My daughter-in-law stood in the middle of a beautifully decorated baby shower, smiling as every guest watched her unwrap gift after gift. Expensive brands, elegant packaging, and designer baby items earned delighted reactions from everyone in the room. Then she reached my package. It was wrapped in plain cream-colored paper with nothing fancy about it. No luxury logo. No oversized ribbon. Just a handmade blanket I had spent months creating with aching hands and countless sleepless nights. She unfolded it, looked at it for only a few seconds, and gave me a polite smile that felt colder than winter. "Oh, it's homemade." Before I could explain why that blanket meant more than any expensive gift in the room, she laughed softly, glanced toward the phone recording the event, and walked straight to the trash bin. "We're only using designer things for the nursery," she joked as she dropped my gift into the garbage. A few guests laughed awkwardly. Others looked away. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply walked over, lifted the blanket out of the trash, folded it carefully, slipped it back into my handbag, wished everyone well, and quietly left. No one stopped me. Not even my own son. That silence hurt far more than the insult. Later that evening, my phone rang. "Kyle." My son's voice was shaking so badly I almost didn't recognize it. "Mom, please tell me you took the blanket home." I looked down at the folded blanket resting beside me on the kitchen table. Running my fingers across the soft yarn, I answered calmly. "Yes. It's here with me." The relief in his voice lasted only a second before another question followed. What exactly was hidden inside it? I closed my eyes. So someone had finally told him. That blanket wasn't simply a handmade gift from an aging grandmother. It carried the final wish of my late husband. It protected a secret he had spent nearly 3 decades preparing for a grandchild he would never have the chance to meet. And because someone judged its value by appearance alone, that priceless legacy had nearly disappeared forever. Before I tell you how my son discovered the truth, you need to understand who I am. My name is Darlene Mercer. I'm 68 years old, and for most of my life I owned a small tailoring shop where I repaired clothes that other people considered worn out. Wedding dresses, business suits, military uniforms, you name it, my hands stitched them back to life. Those hands aren't what they used to be. Arthritis has stolen much of their strength. Some mornings I have to soak them in warm water before they can even close around a needle. Every stitch now costs me time, patience, and pain. But I never stopped believing that things made with love always outlast things bought for attention. My late husband believed the same. Frank wasn't the kind of man who impressed people with flashy purchases. He believed real wealth was built quietly, one thoughtful decision at a time. While others chased bigger houses and newer cars, Frank planned years ahead, thinking about people he might never even meet. I didn't fully understand just how far ahead he had planned until the final week of his life. And what he showed me inside an old box hidden in our closet would change everything, not only for our family, but for the woman who believed my handmade blanket belonged in a trash can. I'll reveal the incredible secret Frank had been protecting for nearly 30 years, and why that simple blanket was actually carrying a gift worth far more than anyone in that room could have imagined. Frank and I were married for 43 years. When you've spent that much time beside someone, silence becomes its own language. We didn't need grand speeches or expensive surprises to know how much we meant to each other. Life had taught us that the smallest gestures often carried the greatest love. 10 months before the baby shower, I lost him. The house became unbearably quiet. His favorite chair stayed empty. His coffee mug remained exactly where he'd left it. Some mornings I'd still catch myself expecting to hear his truck pull into the driveway before remembering that it never would again. But even as his health faded, Frank never stopped thinking about the future. About a week before he passed away, he asked me to bring down an old wooden box that had been sitting untouched on the top shelf of our closet for decades. I had always assumed it held old papers or family keepsakes. Instead, when I opened it, I found dozens of carefully organized envelopes. Inside each one were savings bonds. Some were decades old. Others looked newer. Every envelope had a year written neatly across the front in Frank's unmistakable handwriting. Confused, I looked at him. He smiled weakly and said, "I've been collecting those a little at a time ever since Kyle was a boy." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. For birthdays, work bonuses, overtime pay, and every good financial year, he'd quietly bought another bond and tucked it away. He wasn't saving for retirement. He wasn't saving for himself. He was saving for a grandchild who didn't even exist yet. "I always believed we'd have one someday," he whispered. "Maybe not soon, but someday." My eyes filled with tears as he asked me to read the label on the oldest envelope. It simply said, "For our first grandchild." Frank squeezed my hand with what little strength he had left. "They've all matured now," he told me. "It's finally time." I asked him how much everything was worth. His answer stole my breath. Nearly $50,000. But then he surprised me even more. "I don't want you to hand them an envelope," he said softly. "If they just receive cash, they'll spend it and forget where it came from." He paused to catch his breath before continuing. "Hide it inside something made with love." I looked at him, puzzled. "A blanket," he smiled. "Knit one for the baby. Sew everything inside it. Make them discover it themselves. They'll never forget that moment." It sounded unusual. Maybe even a little old-fashioned. But that was Frank. He believed memories were worth more than money. He wanted our grandchild's first inheritance to tell a story about patience, family, sacrifice, and love that couldn't be measured by a price tag. After he passed away, I held on to that promise with everything I had. Despite the pain in my hands, I spent 4 long months knitting the softest blanket I'd ever made. Cream-colored wool. A border stitched with tiny blue sailboats because Frank had always loved fishing. His initials carefully worked into one corner where only someone paying close attention would notice them. When it was finally finished, I added one last detail. Using skills I'd learned during 40 years as a seamstress, I created a hidden pocket inside the blanket's lining. Into that secret compartment, I placed every savings bond Frank had collected over 30 years. Beside them, I tucked one sealed envelope. It contained the final letter my husband had dictated from his hospital bed, a message written to the grandchild he would never get to hold. I stitched the pocket closed so neatly that no one would ever know it existed unless they searched for it. As I folded the blanket into its gift box, I smiled through my tears. I truly believed I was carrying the most meaningful present anyone at that baby shower would receive. I had no idea that, within minutes of opening it, someone would decide it belonged in a trash can simply because it didn't have a designer label. You'll meet my daughter-in-law and finally see what happened inside that extravagant baby shower, the moment one careless decision nearly destroyed a grandfather's 30-year legacy. By the time the baby shower invitation arrived, I had already wrapped the blanket and placed it in my bedroom, waiting for the right day. The invitation itself looked more like something you'd receive for a luxury gala than a family celebration. Thick embossed paper, gold lettering, and even a suggested dress code. I smiled when I read it. None of that mattered to me. All I could think about was finally delivering Frank's last gift. Before leaving the house that afternoon, I rested my hand on the gift box and whispered, "This is for you, Frank." We finally made it. During the drive, I imagined how everything would unfold. Madison would unwrap the blanket. I'd gently tell her there was something special hidden inside. She'd discover the secret pocket. The room would fall silent as everyone realized that a grandfather, who never had the chance to meet his grandchild, had spent 30 years preparing a future for that little baby. That was how I pictured it. Reality had other plans. The moment I arrived, I knew I didn't quite belong. Every decoration looked professionally designed. White flowers covered every table. A balloon display stretched across one wall while photographers and phones captured every angle of the event. The gifts piled near Madison's chair looked like advertisements from expensive baby boutiques. Designer stroller. Luxury diaper bag. Premium baby monitor. Every package proudly displayed its brand. Mine didn't. I quietly placed my simple cream-colored box beside the mountain of expensive presents and took a seat near the back of the room. My sister-in-law Caroline soon joined me with a warm smile. She had loved Frank like only a sister could, and the moment she saw my gift, she squeezed my hand. "That's the blanket," she whispered. I nodded. She smiled knowingly. "He'd be proud." Then she leaned closer. "Maybe you should tell Madison what's inside before she opens it." I shook my head. "I can't." "Why not?" "Because Frank made me promise." She laughed softly. "Of course he did. Even his surprises came with instructions." Neither of us could have imagined how much we'd regret that conversation later. The gift opening soon began. Madison sat in an oversized decorated chair while one of her closest friends recorded every second on her phone. Each present became its own little performance. "Oh my goodness, this brand is impossible to find. I've wanted this forever. Look how beautiful this is." The guests applauded after nearly every gift. Sometimes it felt as though they admired the price tags more than the presents themselves. I glanced across the room and spotted Kyle. My son stood quietly near the wall, holding a drink he barely touched. He smiled whenever someone looked his way, but there was something forced about it. He caught my eye once and offered an apologetic shrug. At the time, I thought he was simply uncomfortable with all the attention. Later, I'd realize he already feared something might go wrong. Eventually only 2 gifts remained. A greeting card. And my small cream-colored package tied with a blue ribbon. Madison picked it up with polite curiosity. Her mother smiled. "Looks like Grandma made something herself." Several guests turned toward me with pleasant expressions. For a brief moment, I felt hopeful again. Madison carefully removed the wrapping paper and unfolded the blanket. The soft cream wool caught the afternoon light. The tiny blue sailboats lined the border exactly as I'd imagined. To me, it was the most beautiful thing in the room. She held it up for only a few seconds. Then I watched her expression change. Her smile stiffened. Her eyes scanned the stitching. She realized immediately that it had been handmade. "Oh," she said slowly. "You knitted this?" "Yes," I answered warmly, already beginning to rise from my chair. "I wanted to tell you there's something very special." But she never gave me the chance to finish. She spoke over me while turning toward the camera. "That's sweet." Then she laughed. "I guess it has that homemade charm." A few polite chuckles echoed around the room. I forced myself to smile, believing the awkward moment would pass. I still intended to quietly explain everything after the gifts were opened. Instead, Madison glanced around the perfectly decorated room, looked back at the blanket, and made a decision that would change every relationship in our family. She stood up, still smiling for the camera, and walked toward the trash can. I felt my heart begin to race. Surely she was only clearing away the wrapping paper. Surely she wasn't about to do what I feared. I had no idea that the next few seconds would erase every joyful expectation I'd carried with me that day. You'll witness the shocking moment my daughter-in-law threw the blanket into the trash in front of everyone, and why my calm response left the entire room speechless before the truth finally came to light. Madison stopped beside the trash bin with my blanket draped casually over one arm. She smiled toward the phone that was recording every second of the baby shower, then looked around at the guests as if she were about to deliver the perfect joke. "You know," she said with a light laugh, "we've worked really hard on the nursery style." A few people smiled, unsure where she was going. "We're sticking with designer pieces only." Then, without another thought, she released the blanket. It landed inside the trash can on top of torn wrapping paper and paper cups. For a moment, the room erupted with scattered laughter. Some guests chuckled because everyone else did. Others forced uneasy smiles, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to challenge the hostess. The sound echoed through the room. I barely heard any of it. All I could see was that blanket lying in the bottom of the bin. Inside it rested 30 years of Frank's quiet devotion. Inside it waited the final letter he had written with fading strength from a hospital bed. Inside it was a future he had patiently built for a grandchild he would never meet. And not a single person in that room knew it. I slowly turned toward my son. Kyle's face had gone completely pale. For one brief second, I thought he would step forward. His lips parted. His eyes met mine. Then he looked away. He said nothing. That silence hurt more than Madison's actions ever could. The blanket could be picked up. The money could be protected. But watching my own son remain silent while his grieving mother's gift was publicly humiliated left a wound that would take far longer to heal. I could have shouted. I could have marched across the room and announced exactly what had just been thrown into the trash. I could have exposed Madison in front of every guest there. Instead, I took a slow breath. Anger would have satisfied the crowd. Calmness would reveal their character. Without saying a word, I walked toward the trash can. The room gradually became quiet. Even Madison looked slightly confused. She had expected tears. Perhaps an argument. Maybe even a dramatic confrontation. Instead, I reached into the bin, lifted the blanket out with both hands, and carefully brushed away the bits of wrapping paper clinging to it. I folded each corner with the same care I'd used while knitting it. No rushing. No trembling. No raised voice. When I finished, I placed it gently inside my handbag. Madison let out an awkward laugh. "Oh, did you want to keep it?" I smiled politely. "I think it belongs with me." Her smile faded. For the first time that afternoon, she looked uncertain. The room felt strangely uncomfortable now. Nobody laughed anymore. Several guests avoided looking at either of us. Others stared at the floor. The joke had somehow stopped being funny. "I'm going to head home," I said quietly. "Thank you for inviting me. I truly hope the rest of your celebration is wonderful." I wished them well. I congratulated them on the baby. Then I walked toward the front door with my head held high. No one tried to stop me. Outside, the afternoon air felt cooler than before. I climbed into my car, closed the door, and finally allowed myself to breathe. For several minutes I simply held the blanket against my chest. It carried the faint smell of the garbage can now. That nearly broke me. Tears streamed down my face as I whispered into the empty car. "I'm sorry, Frank. I should have protected your gift better." But as the tears slowly faded, something unexpected replaced them. Not anger. Not revenge. Clarity. I realized that Frank had never intended this gift for people who judged love by appearances. He had saved that money for his grandchild, not for anyone else's pride or reputation. If the blanket had remained in that house, its meaning would have been lost. As I drove home, one decision became perfectly clear. The money would still reach the child. The promise I had made to Frank would still be honored. But it would happen on my terms, not theirs. I had barely stepped inside my house when the telephone rang. It wasn't Kyle. It was Caroline. Her voice trembled before she even spoke. "Darlene. I think I accidentally told Kyle what was inside the blanket." My heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "After you left, I couldn't stop thinking about what happened. I told him his father would have been heartbroken after spending 30 years saving those bonds, and the look on Kyle's face." She paused, fighting back tears. "Darlene. I don't think he ever knew." I closed my eyes. Everything suddenly made sense. Kyle hadn't remained silent because he knew what had been thrown away. He had believed it was simply a handmade blanket. But now he knew the truth. And somewhere across town, my son was carrying a burden that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Only minutes later, my phone rang again. This time, it was Kyle. My son finally learns what his silence almost cost him. His emotional phone call changes everything, and the truth about Frank's hidden legacy leaves the entire family facing consequences no one saw coming. I had barely placed the blanket on my kitchen table when the phone rang again. This time, I didn't need to look at the screen. A mother knows. It was Kyle. I answered quietly. "Hello, sweetheart." For several seconds, there was only silence. Then I heard him take a shaky breath. "Mom, please tell me you brought the blanket home." I rested my hand on the folded wool beside me. "I did." Another long pause followed. Then came a sound no parent ever forgets. Pure relief. "Oh, thank God," he whispered. His breathing slowed for only a moment before he asked the question that told me everything. "Mom, what was inside it?" I closed my eyes. Caroline had been right. He hadn't known. He had stood there believing Madison had thrown away nothing more than a handmade blanket. Now he understood there had been much more at stake. I spoke gently. "Your father spent nearly 30 years buying savings bonds for his first grandchild." The line went completely silent. "They matured this year," I continued. "They're worth just under $50,000. Still nothing." And tucked beside them was a letter your father dictated from his hospital bed. A letter written for the grandchild he knew he would never get to meet. I heard Kyle trying to breathe. Then his voice cracked. I didn't stop her." His words came out almost as a whisper. "I was standing right there, and I didn't stop her." For the first time since he was a little boy, I heard my son cry without trying to hide it. He wasn't crying because of the money. He was grieving something much deeper. His own silence. "I kept telling myself it was only a blanket," he said between sobs. "I didn't want to make a scene." I laughed. I actually laughed. His voice broke completely. "I failed, Dad." Tears filled my own eyes, but I kept my voice steady. "No, Kyle. You made a mistake. There's a difference." "I should have protected you," he whispered. "I should have protected both of you." Neither of us spoke for several moments. Sometimes silence says more than advice ever can. Finally he asked the question I had been expecting. "What happens now?" I looked at the blanket lying on the table. Frank's careful stitches were still perfect. The hidden pocket remained unopened. His dream had survived. "My promise to your father hasn't changed," I answered. "His grandchild will receive every single dollar. But after today, things have to be done differently." Kyle didn't interrupt. "I won't hand that money directly to anyone. It belongs to the baby. It will stay protected until the day it's truly needed." He quietly replied, "I understand." Then his voice grew firmer than I had heard in years. "I need to make this right. I need Madison to understand what she did." For the first time during the conversation, I heard something new in my son's voice. Not guilt. Strength. The same quiet determination his father always carried. "Then bring everyone to my house," I said. "You. Madison. Caroline. Anyone who needs to hear the truth." There was another brief silence. Then he answered without hesitation. "We'll be there." After we ended the call, I carefully opened the hidden seam in the blanket. One by one, I removed Frank's savings bonds. 30 years of patience rested in my hands. Beside them lay the sealed envelope addressed to the grandchild who would someday read it. I smiled through my tears. "You were right, Frank," I whispered. "They never opened the blanket. They judged it before they understood it." But as I looked at everything spread across my kitchen table, another thought came to me. Perhaps this wasn't the ending Frank had imagined. Perhaps it was the one our family needed. The blanket hadn't revealed who deserved the money. It had revealed who still needed to learn its true value. I gathered the bonds, folded the letter carefully, and placed everything back inside the blanket. This time, however, I left the hidden seam loose. The next time it was opened, there would be no secrets. Every member of the family would witness exactly what had almost been thrown away, and they would all have to face the consequences together. Because sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money. It's the lesson that teaches a family the difference between price and value. The entire family gathers around my dining table. As I open the blanket in front of everyone, a grandfather's final letter is read aloud, a hidden fortune is revealed, and one heartbreaking truth changes every relationship in the room forever.